Hello everyone, welcome to whatifissei was imprisoned by Rias Gremory Part 3, Chapter 15. Trouble, Underworld, Wasteland. Have you seen anything yet, Magus? Asked a devil soldier as he landed next to another devil, one called Magus. Magus turned to his comrade before shaking his head. No, nothing yet, well besides rocks and sand. Magus said as he continued to stare out over the open wastelands before him, only a few rocks standing above it, with even fewer mountains reaching out of the sand. The other devil, one hinata, sighed deeply as he sat down on a nearby rock. Why are we doing this again? It's just some reincarnated devil who couldn't take it anymore and ran away from home, so why is it so important we find him? Shouldn't we be hunting the Chaos Brigade or maybe that SS class stray? Andrus asked, his tone being obviously annoyed as he and many others had been out here for 2 days now looking for someone. I know you don't like this, but it's an order from Lucifer himself, so we can't just give up without trying. And if he is sending us out here, then it means he believes in us and that this person might be very important. We could finally become high-class devils if we find him. Magus said, trying to make Andrus become more interested, which seemed to work as he jumped off the rock with a new wave of energy. Right. Let's do this and then we can be lazy for the rest of our life. Andrus was stopped mid-speech by someone cutting him clean in half, letting both halves of him fall to the ground. Magus stood there frozen in fear, not even reacting when blood began to come spraying out of Andrus, hitting him in the face. He was more scared of the man who stood behind where Andrus had stood before. He had long blonde and black spiked hair and 2 different colored eyes to match his hair color. He wore a simple shirt with what seemed like a pair of long shorts, both were black with blonde marks all over. Before Magus could say, do or think, he was blown up with a giant stack of black lighting. HMP, simple-minded idiots, you all really thought you could my domain without me noticing. I guess my lack of payback has made your egos and pride turn you into this. Crom said. Before turning around and walking past the few other groups of devils he had killed today. But I do wonder, who is this person that has made them become this? Stupid I guess, as to make them all venture into my domain. Guess I should give them a visit. Crom said before another stack of black lighting hit him. When it was gone, he had disappeared with it to only God knows where. Underworld devil territory, at the party. My dear darling Asia, my love and light in my tormented life, how I have missed you. Vritra roared out again, his voice sounding joyful and relieved to see her again after over 1,000 years. The many guests surrounding the group were all shocked to learn the heiress of the Citri clan had Vritra's host as a servant. But the main group, though, were all stunned to learn of Asia's connection to Vritra and Issei too. Both Sona and Rias were still trying to process this information, and the others didn't feel they had a place in this upcoming conversation. But not Akeno. She stood right next to Asia and could see the fear on her face. Akeno didn't know why she did this, but she wanted to. With one hard slap, Asia was down on the floor as a red mark now had formed on her left cheek. You gave birth to that monster, Akeno asked, her voice sounding angry, but in her eyes tears had begun to gather. Asia held a hand up to her cheek, shock written all over her face, though it was quickly forgotten as the ancient dragon roared out in anger. Don't touch her, you dirty half-blood. Don't you dare touch my mate, filth. Are you okay my dear? Vritra roared out as his aura, even though it was suppressed by the gears he was inside of, made everyone close to the 2 peerages feel a sudden wave of dread and fear come from Saji's arm. Akeno had this feeling, this want to fight back against the dragon, but Rias with a quick hand draw and step stopped her. I am terribly sorry, Dragon King Vritra, but do know she didn't mean to offend you, as she has been very stressed lately. I hope you can forgive her. Rias said bowing before the aura that was being released from Saji's hand. Akeno wanted to say something, but one sharp glare from Rias made her back down, at least for now. I will not accept this offense, but as I can't do anything for now, you shall be spared crow. Now Saji, walk over and help my mate. Vritra semi-ordered, making Saji look over to Sona asking for permission, which he gained as Sona nodded with careful look in her eyes. Saji walked over to the still knocked down Asia, as he tried to come closer she crawled away from him, making him stop and looking at her confused. Don't come closer, you monster. Asia said, her voice trembling with how scared she was. Asia. My dear, what's wrong? It's me, your Vritra. I know what you did, you monster. You and your monster of a son have nothing to do with me, not anymore. Asia yelled out, cutting Vritra off. Vritra was confused at her statement, even hurt by her cruel words. But then something else began to stir inside of him. Rage. Rage that she would call his child a monster. Vritra, I know you're angry, but I don't Saji suddenly began to scream out in pain. Then he fell down on his knees, still screaming out in pain. Sona ran over to him, going down on her knees trying to look for what was wrong. Saji. What's wrong? Sona cried out as Saji continued to scream in pain. Though it began to slowly morph into a roar, he suddenly went on all fours, standing like an animal. The many pieces of his sacred gears began to unleash an awful amount of dread and rage, but it was obvious for the people with a better aspect of sense could tell it was not Saji's rage, but Vritra. Don't you dare call Ritara that. He is much better than I am, and you should know that, he has your heart. You should be ashamed to call yourself a mother. Roared out, his love for his son being more than his love for his mate, at least in this instant. Saji kept screaming out, but he tried to mentally calm Vritra, but the old dragon was not having it, as his aura kept leaking out through the many sacred gears on Saji's body. The party hall became fully focused on this single instant, as no one could overlook the hanging feeling of dread and bloodlust coming from the two peerages. It even stopped the 9 faction officials, who had been discussing another and much more important matter. It was Sirzechs, Serafal, Ajuk and Grafia for devils, Michiel for the angels, Azazel, Shemiza and Barakail for the fallen angels, and Odin the All-Father and his guard Roswis the Valkyrie. Odin, the oldest of the and one of the most powerful gods in Europair, began to laugh at the sight of all the devils, the few fallen angels and pure angels, all being focused on the youngsters. Is this some kind of entertainment, you brat Azazel? The old man jokingly asked, never taking things too seriously, and thus his way of speaking was not very serious either. Azazel knew this, and it was also one of the reasons why they got along so well. Well, old man, if I told you so, would you believe it? Azazel joked back, earning a sigh from his 2 more serious companions and a small chuckle from Odin. Lord Odin, this is no time to joke around, it's clear the devils are planning something, we shouldn't have come. The Valkyrie said sternly, making the nearby devils, at least Serafal, pout at the insult. Odin just sighed tiredly at her statement, raising a hand up stopping her from saying any more. You see, this is why no one wants to date you Roswis. You're always too serious. Odin said, making the grey-haired beauty fall onto the floor on her knees, begin to sob and cry. That's not true. I just don't have enough time for relationships. Roswis cried, making Odin sigh again. I am sorry for the young woman here, she just gets really easily upset when it comes to these things. It's fine Lord Odin, now if you'll excuse me, I have a party and heiresses to save. Sirzechs said, before going off stage with Grafia following after him. Azazel also followed after them, wanting to see what all the fuss was about and maybe see if he could get a clue to where Issei would go. When the 3, much more powerful beings neared the crowd, they were let in and now saw the sight of Saji being held back Kaneko, Kiba, Zenobia, Uran Meguri, as he seemed to be trying to claw Asia with his hands. Sirzechs' presence didn't seem to stop them, not even when he tried to leak some of his aura. So he chose the old and tested method. Stop this instant. Shouting at the top of his lunges, which seemed to work as Saji turned his attention towards him. Though his eyes weren't his grey ones, but bright purple. He only saw it for a split second when all of a sudden they changed back to grey and he and the group of people trying to pull him back all fell over. Sirzechs sighed, already feeling a headache coming on and that the old fools in the Devil Council would use this against him and the other Devil Kings. Rias, Sona. Follow me and bring your peerages, we're going to have to talk about this. Sirzechs said, feeling the many stares from the other guests, judging him silently. Sona and Rias both agreed, though as precaution Grafia suddenly bound Saji in some magic. They began to walk out of the main hall and towards a side room, a room that was planned to be used for further discussion between the 3 biblical factions and Norse mythology. Azazel followed along, wanting to find out as much as he could. He was also curious about what he saw, as he also saw the sudden change in eye color from Saji. But before they could enter, a sudden wave of magic could be felt in the room. What is it now? Sirzechs asked, slightly annoyed. Underworld, wasteland. Somewhere up high, on the tallest mountain in the underworld, which also happened to be placed right in the middle of the wasteland. On a circle-like cliffside, sat 7 different beings, all of them being extremely powerful and not giving a damn about hiding it. And even if someone did pick up on it, what could they do against the most powerful evil dragons? Prom Kruich, Apophis, Layden, Ozzy Dahaka, Nihagra, Grendel and Yamata no Arachi. Who could beat them all alone? Only the dragon gods, and even then it would be tough as an evil dragon usually don't live long, as all factions have put a hit on their head the moment they become one. So if one lives as long as they have, then they're just that strong, and it's the reason they can sit here and show off their aura without a care. So what's with this sudden meeting, Crom? I was having a pretty nice nap before you woke me up. Layden said, a bit of annoyance obvious in his voice. But his question was valid, as the others wanted to know as well. Yeah, do tell, or else I have some dumb shit I need to train the Trivsum gave me. Brendel piped in too, though his voice was relaxed, mostly because he didn't have to watch a bunch of wussies train for the next half an hour. Prom just smirked as he raised his hands in a defensive way before getting out of his stony throne. My friends, calm yourselves. I have good reasons for calling you all here. It happens to be about our dear Lord Lucifer. Anyone could practically hear the amount of disrespect he had in the way he said that name, as why would he respect someone who sees himself above a dragon? Niagara stood up himself and walked over to him, standing in the middle of the circle of dragons. So then what is it? I have a job to be doing, and right now I am losing at least 100 years worth of time. That tree won't poison itself. He yelled as raised his arms up high, trying to make a bigger impact. He just earned him a chuggle from Grendel, making him turn towards him semi-pissed. What? He roared at him. Oh, it's nothing, I just find it so fucking pathetic that some of you guys have this whole thing with having to kill or destroy one specific thing. Why not just wreak havoc everywhere like me and Crom do? Grendel asked as he stretched his belly, switching his legs, making his left lie on his right and having both legs hanging over the side of a stone seat. Niagara just seemed to get more pissed as he flicked his tongue angrily out and in his mouth. Before the dragons could continue this, for now, the verbal fight, Crom began to speak again. I know, but I have an idea of how you could do that. I have an idea for how we all can do what we want. Crom said as he turned towards the edge of cliff, having a 3 kilometers drop before him, not that it would kill him. The other ancient dragons looked at him, their attention focused solely on him, as one thought went through all of their minds. Do what we all want. Apophis chuckled a bit as he spread his legs, putting his arms on his legs for support and having his hands under his chin. Do what we all want. Really? That's your angle? I have heard better offers from Ra. Apophis continued to chuggle as his long black hair began to rise, forming many snake-like heads, all of them looking at Crom. Sure, it's not the best offer, but it's also the most natural one, if you think about it. Not that any of you do though, so I guess I should explain it so all of you can understand. Crom said, earning himself a few low growls from the others. He raised both of his arms, forming his aura around him. His arms didn't look like arms, as they looked more like wings with magical thin skin. His head had 2 giant horns, they too were made of magic. The others looked closely, as none of them knew what he was up to. His aura had begun to form a giant dark cloud right above the mountaintop, swirling around menacingly, with a few crackles and bolts dancing out of the cloud and back into it. I Crom Cruach offer you all the chance to join me and start our own faction. One where we can make every faction fear us and let those idiot devils who think they're better than us realize that they shouldn't have been so open about their plans. Crom said, before letting his arms down and having the cloud above them go absolutely ballistic as it destroyed most of the mountainside. Though none of the 8 dragons cared about that, as they were more curious about how he planned to teach those devil a lesson. So will we do this? Make the devils realize that they shouldn't have been open? I don't really know anything we can use against them. Ozzy Dahaka asked, earning a chuggle from Crom. Oh, you poor idiots really don't know much, do you? We're going to use the beast, snatch right away from those prideful idiots. Crom said. There was complete silence before a combined roar. How? Crom just looked at them a bit shocked before sighing. When they find out where it's sealed and have released it, then we snatch away Rizvam's mind control thing and put it under our control instead. Crom said it like it was a matter of fact, like something that anyone would think. The others just went wide-eyed, all looking at each other in complete silence. Then an almost lethal amount of dread and bloodlust was released from them all, as they all formed toothy smirks and turned their sights towards Crom as he sat down in his throne. He too had a smirk, but his eyes were something else. He had his usually blonde and black eyes changed for a blonde and black stack of lighting. Before we go too far with this, I will need to invite one more person. He will be useful. Very useful. Crom spoke, the others just nodding in response. The mountain was almost completely covered in a feeling of bloodlust. Chapter 16. Family Reunion. Underworld, Wasteland. On top of the fully soaked mountain of bloodlust, one of the evil dragons stopped having a toothy smirk and instead had a wondering expression. It was Apophis and his many snake-like heads made of his black hair, they all looked between each other and him, like they were talking about something. Crom, who would this person happen to be since you would like him to join us? He must be strong, if you believe him to be useful. Apophis asked, making the others also look at him, now wondering the same. He had asked a good question, since none of them knew of any powerful evil dragon besides themselves, and the few others who did exist were all dead. And Vritra was sealed, so they really didn't have a clue who this evil dragon would be. Crom just looked at Apophis a bit shocked. You mean? You don't remember him? Crom asked, genuinely shocked, which made the others even more confused. No, I don't think I do. I would remember most people I meet if they were strong or had something interesting to them. Apophis said, before shrugging his shoulders. Crom just sighed before reaching his hand upwards. The other looked at him weirdly, all of them besides Grendel as he began to run. The others were now more confused before a giant stack of black lighting hit Apophis square on the head. It didn't hurt him that much, but he still hissed very angered by this. What in Ra's golden sun was that for? Apophis yelled, not caring that he used a phrase his eternal enemy had made. Crom just looked at him neutral before speaking again. That was a much lighter punishment than the one our dear dragon goddess over there would have given you, wouldn't you say so, office? Crom said, as all of them looked towards the sudden snake that had just summoned itself out of thin air. Right you are, evil dragon. I would have killed you, snake, for not remembering my son. Office said in her stoic voice, making all of the other dragons have wide eyes at sudden her appearance and her statement. Her son? I thought Lilith was an only child. Apophis thought, making him grind his brain and break a lot of gears to remember who this man could be. He gave up though, having a bit of defeated look to him as still tried to remember, even if he had given up. Crom sighed before sitting down in a more comfortable way. She is talking about our dear fallen dragon king, Vritra's hatchling Rias Gremory Crouch. He recently agreed to have Office become his godmother, thereby making him her child. Crom explained, his voice sounding just a bit happy about the last bit. The others just looked at him, all having stunned faces as they were trying to wrap themselves around the fact that Vritra had a kid. B said kid has been adopted by Office, making them a demigod by name only, and C he was related to Crom somehow. What? Crom asked as he noticed the stunned faces and almost too quiet silence. Brendel was the only one brave enough to ask, so after sitting down on his chair, he raised his head to have eye contact with Crom. Did you and Vritra have a child together? Grendel asked, for once instead of joking and uncaring tone, it was dead serious. There was now a new silence, an awkward one as everyone was now looking at Crom, even Office. Office mostly because she found this amusing, as she knew most of the truth, at least more than any of the people gathered here. Crom lowered his head before holding a hand over it. Then he began laughing. The others, except Office, felt a bit afraid as Crom's laughs became more insane. He then stopped and looked directly at Grendel with the most stoic face they had ever seen. It could rival and beat Office. No, he's my nephew. Crom said. The others didn't like how he sounded, as his stoic voice and face did not match the Crom they all knew. It didn't match the whole, super evil dragon king image they all had of him. At the lack of questions or talking, Office decided to speak up again. So why do you want to invite my son into your little evil dragon club now? You could have done this over 100 years ago. She asked, raising a good question for Crom answer, and also something the others became confused about. Well, goddess. If you all must really know. He wasn't ready back then, and the time wasn't right to start this whole faction yet. Crom answered. His answer was reasonable to most of them, as some of them were still not yet aware of each other's situation, as in if they were dead or sealed. Plus they didn't have something like the beast, or at least a plan to use it back then. Though Office didn't agree with his explanation, she had reached out to Crom as one of the first people to join her on the journey to regain her home. Back then he had said he didn't want to be a part of any faction, he just wanted to be by himself. The others had already taken his words for what they were and didn't question it any deeper. Office still had her stoic face, so no one could see the still irritation over his lie, but no one could see her confusion either, over why he chose to lie. Are you all satisfied now? If so, I have a nephew to find, he should have apparently run away from the devil territory. So I would like to be a supportive uncle, if you don't mind. Crom said, but this time his voice held more of his normal charm. Underworld Devil Territory, Devil Youth Party. Up above the space where all the guests stood, a magical blue gate manifested itself. It had many different Norse runes on it, but it held mostly one specific to one of the Norse gods. Loki came out of the door, making his father, Odin, sigh at his son's actions. I object to this meeting. Father, you should not bow to these weaker factions. Loki yelled out as the gate behind him disappeared. Odin just sighed again at his son's antics. Well, what would you have me do instead then, Loki? Let the Chaos Brigade do as they wish and destroy the Biblic factions. Then what, who will they destroy after them? Odin asked Loki, who just smirked. He had a lot of pride, too much if anything. Surely father, we can beat them on our own. After all, they're just outcasts of lesser factions. Loki said, no hint of doubt in his voice. And this, my son, is why you'll never be given an important role in Asgard. You view everyone as lesser unless they're the same as you. Your pride will one day be your downfall. Odin spoke, his voice rough with the knowledge of his many thousands years of living. He too had been prideful, and it had cost him. Sirzechs flew up from the floor to be on a similar height to Loki. Lord Loki, I will excuse this if you back down now. Loki just scoffed at his words. Sirzechs' face was rather neutral, as he was trying to hide his irritation and tiredness. Many of the leaders in the biblical factions had been informed about the possible super stray, only Azazel, Seraphol and Ajuk had been told who this really was. That case, the Chaos Brigade, and now Loki was beginning to get to him, something the other leaders gathered could see or at least sense. He began to unleash his aura, only a small dose as a way to tell Loki to step down now. Odin would have stepped in had it not been for Loki's next words. If my pride will be my downfall, then you joining Office's side will be yours, father. Auden looked stunned as he remembered the day Office had come and asked for his faction's help with something. That something being killing Great Red, something he didn't want to take part in as would mean his and his family's downfall. Loki, what have you done? Auden spoke with anger in his voice. Loki just smirked even more as he showed off his aura, letting everyone feel the slight and almost missable bit that was clearly not his own aura. It was an infinite feeling, and almost voidless too, a clear sign that it belonged to Office. I have done what you couldn't do, father. I took an unknown path and became more powerful for it. Loki yelled out as his aura began to fill most of the hall, making the weaker guest feel lightheaded and some just outright faint. Stand down this instant, Loki, or you will have to face a much worse punishment than any I have given you before. Auden yelled to his son as he noticed both Sirzechs and Sirzechs powering up slightly. He had tried to warn him, but as he was now a member of the Chaos Brigade, he was thereby a terrorist in enemy territory. He couldn't do anything outside of trying to make him rethink his actions. But his words fell on deaf ears. I care not, this is only part of my destiny. Soon Ragnarok will be upon us, this was only a stepping stone in my story. Loki yelled out as he began to form many different magical circles behind him, most of them being ice magic. Auden sighs in defeat as he sees this, he then looks toward Sirzechs getting eye contact for a split second. Sirzechs understood his unspoken words, letting Sirzechs know as well with a similar method. Sirzechs use a much more refined version of his power of destruction, forming them into small bullets and firing them at the many different magical circles behind Loki. It broke the spells, making Loki have to remake them and charge them up again. This gave Sirzechs time to charge a capturing spell, which he fired off as soon as he had given enough power to last for one whole day. Suddenly Loki was captured inside a crystal-like magical pyramid. For one moment Loki looked a bit stunned, then his face gained a scowl as he then pointed angrily at Sirzechs. Is this all you can do, you so-called super devil? A simple capture spell. You're all paid. Before he said anything else, the pyramid and Loki teleported away to some barren area in the devil territory. The two super devils powered down again, as the threat had been removed, if only momentarily. They needed to make a plan to capture Loki in a more permanent prison. Underworld wasteland, undeveloped civilization. In the wastelands, in a faraway corner, far from the eyes of the major underworld factions, a small and young civilization had begun to rise. Its people were a mixture of different races, but they all shared one thing in common, that they were all considered demons or monsters. They did pose demonic powers and monster strength, but they too had come to a point in their history where they wanted to be more, and thus they had begun to make their civilization. It of course had its struggles, as there were no trees or any chance to grow anything. So they overcame those things by hunting for food and by using stones in more advanced ways than most other civilizations had done at their beginning. They had already begun to play with metals, having animals as food sources and other useful resources. If they had started when everyone else had, then they would have been one of the great ones. Even now they could still reach that goal, in maybe only a few hundred years more. But the world would never know, as the great town that housed this new faction was no more than rubble and ruins. Giant baths of purple fire were spread all over the place, along with giant tracks of a snake were visible in the would-be roads and sands around the town. The cries and screams of the last few remaining people could be heard until they suddenly stopped. In the former town center stood a monster. He was a mix of draconic features and human ones, having a long tail with a lethally shaped end. His arms and legs were covered in black scales. He had no shoes on, so the guards who were still trying to fight him could see his clawed feet. His hands were also clawed. He was easily as tall as the guards, but was thinner compared to them. He had his head and face covered by his long purple and black hair, the only things the guards could see were the purple lights in his eyes and two black horns sticking out of his head. If they were seen as monsters, then he would be seen as the monster of all monsters. He slowly lowered his hands, making the guards think he was surrendering. He wasn't and had done it only to make the guards put their guard down. Fucking dumbasses he. Issei said, before slashing his arms in cross and killing them all. More blood splattered onto the sands and dead bodies that had been put there before. Issei moved his hands up to his head, holding it for a bit. He sighed heavily before moving his hair off his face. His face had aged somewhat, his skin had become much darker in tone, and his mouth had become larger or at least wider. He winced a bit before putting his right hand on his left side as he felt a stirring pain rise from that area mostly. He looked at the area before wincing again as the pain came back before disappearing again. He didn't know what this pain was, but he had a good idea of what it might be. He was becoming a stray, but because he hadn't killed Rias and he is trying to fight it, it is hurting him. That was his main theory for now. He would ask Drake as he would know for sure, but he wouldn't answer, no matter how much Issei had tried to talk with him for the last 4 or 3 days. He was so occupied with his left side that he didn't hear the small monster that was running at him. They were roaring as they opened their mouths, ready to bite him. It leaped at him, its many sharp teeth ready to bite down on him. But when it bit him, its teeth almost broke on impact with Issei's scars. Only then did Issei notice its presence. He used his tail to grab it by the leg and make it face him face to face. When Issei saw it, his eyes went a bit wide before narrowing a bit again. The monster he was holding in his tail was a young boy. He could tell by the smell he was giving off, it was similar to one of the guards he had fought earlier. This kid was one of the guards he just killed, son. He had tried to get revenge for murder of his father, maybe even for the murder of his family and home. Issei didn't know and didn't really care either. He looked blankly at the small boy, wondering who he could have been in a few years from now if he hadn't decided to attack this place. His tail began to slowly coil itself around the boy's neck before tightening itself. Slowly and surely the boy began to lose the light in his eyes. His arms, which he had been swiping at Issei with, went limp and soon the rest of his body. And then his heartbeat ceased. His dead body was dropped to the ground with no remorse from his killer. Issei turned around as the sound of few remaining cries could be heard. He began walking towards the source of the sound, finding still half-alive people and guards along the way and striking them down for good with his tail. He found the building the cries were coming from, but when he stood outside of it, the cries became quiet and only low breaths could be heard in its place. Trying to hide now. A bit late for that. Oh well, Issei thought. He reared his head backwards, sucking in a large amount of air as he did, then he shot his back toward the building. He opened his mouth and out came dark purple flames. They consumed the building in a matter of seconds and had already filled the room inside of it, as could be heard by the screams of agony coming from inside. Issei closed his mouth again, looking at his handiwork for a bit before heading somewhere else. Small time skip. After his massacre on the town was mostly complete, at least as far as Issei knew, he went searching for food and water in the still somewhat standing buildings. He did not find any of those things, but he did find an outdoor bath in the house of some rich citizen. He didn't think water was easy to get out here, and if someone could just have an outdoor bath here, then it must only mean they were rich. Seeing the clear water gave him a quick flash of the first time he ever saw the ocean in the human world. A giant lack of salt water, that's what he believed it was back then, before Sirzechs had told him what it really was. He had even met the Midgard serpent in it once, over 150 years ago. It was quite the sight to see the second longest dragon in the supernatural world. He also noticed, when his mind left the realm of memories and returned to reality, that his rather ruined clothes, if one could even them that, were almost fully soaked in blood and sand. So here he was, somewhat sweaty, dirty clothes and a bit reminiscent. So he ripped his clothes off, thinking that he could just transform to his true form and stay like that for a while, or find some clothes in the remains of the town and jump into the bath. It was a nice soothing warmth that embraced him when his toes touched the water. It felt relaxing to have it touch him all over his body, even if it did dirty the water, as sand and blood began to color the former clear water into a more brown and red color. But Issei didn't really care and he knew a spell to clean the water, so what was the harm? Well, other than making him look a bit more insane or freaky than normal, but who was here to judge him? No one. No one was here. His former, somewhat okay or good mood became a bit more depressing when he noticed this fact. He was alone, again. He was not in his prison like so many times before or trapped in his egg like he once was. No, this time he was free, but he was still alone. He had left his cage and his home, but found that the world outside was just as lonely as the cage was. The only difference being that at least being inside the cage meant that someone would open it at some point. He curled himself up a bit, holding his knees with both of his arms and placed his head on top of them. He just sat there in the now much less warmer and more dirty water, thinking about this one aspect. I am still alone. Even now. Why am I always alone? He screamed out in his mind, making the old dragon wake and listen in on his host's thoughts. Why is it always like this? Why couldn't I? Why couldn't just have been born normal? Why mother? Why do you hate me? Is it because I am his son? Issei thought. Braig kept listening and started to feel bad for his host. He was a misunderstood person and these things had led him to the place in life he was now. He had never known who his parents were until after he came out of his egg. He had never understood why the people around him always had trouble or didn't want to say his name, his real name to him. He had been used by his mate, he had been isolated far longer than any person should be and was only brought out to do someone else's dirty work. Braig wanted to say something to his partner but didn't feel he had the right as he was part of the reason why Issei is the man he is today. He didn't help him just because of one flaw Issei made. So he decided to keep listening but noticed Issei hadn't been talking or thinking to himself for a bit. He was looking at someone who Braig as soon as he saw him through Issei's eyes, Regan East. Hey Issei, it's been a long time. How's my favorite nephew? Crom asked as he too, much like his nephew jumped into the bath. Uncle. Issei yelled out in joy. Chapter 17. I am Ritara. Underworld Wasteland. Uncle. What are you doing here? Issei asked, seeing his uncle had given him back some joy while it had given Drake dread. He didn't want to relive what these two's last encounter had caused. Crom just smiled warmly as he leaned back against the side of the bath he was on. Well, I heard from a little shit devil that a big black snake had left the nest and was somewhere in the wastelands. So I thought I should come by and say hello. Crom said as he winked at Issei, who just giggled at his words. Yeah. What are you really here for? It can't just be for me, or is it because I have broken one of your rules, your highness king of the wastelands? Issei said before doing a bow with his head, making Crom laugh. Issei joined in on the laughing as well. He was enjoying this moment very much. He hadn't seen his uncle in over a decade, and last time he did, Sirzechs and his adoptive family decided to imprison him. But right now that didn't matter right now. What mattered right now was getting to spend this moment with his uncle. No, not yet at least. Oh, I met your godmother a few hours earlier, she said. Hi. Crom said, but ended up with a confused face as Issei's face went pale. It only became like this when Issei heard the word mother. Crom, once again not fully living up to his titles, moved over to the side of Issei and put a hand on his left shoulder. What's wrong? I know your godmother is scary, believe me, she would have killed one of my colleagues today if I hadn't punished him in her place. Crom said, trying to lighten the mood, but it didn't seem to work as Issei didn't seem to react. Crom moved closer, making the two touch each with their hips, which finally seemed to wake Issei from his pale state. Oh sorry, what were you saying? Is Office missing me? Oh okay. I'll see if I can see her one of these days. Issei said. This confused Crom even more, as he had never seen Issei be like this. Speaking fast, sounding slightly afraid and having this feeling of a small scared child for only brief seconds. Yes. She misses you. But are you sure you're okay? You seem a bit off, I mean more than back then. Now that I think about it, you haven't talked about how beautiful or interesting your mate, Rias, is yet. Crom said, in a lighter tone, trying to lift up Issei's spirits. Issei again suddenly froze at the mention of his mate's name. He hadn't once thought about her in the last 3 or 4 days. He hadn't thought about how she might be feeling right now or how she felt about him right now. He was brought out of his thoughts as Crom spoke again, but in a way he hadn't heard in a very long time. Issei, I can't help you unless you let me know what's tormenting you. I may be the closest thing to a mortal god, but I can't read or see your thoughts. Crom said, his tone being more that of a father than one of an insightful uncle. Issei lowered his head, his long hair covering his face, as well as the top of the water. I fucked up, Crom. I thought I knew what I was doing, I thought it was a good idea to mess with things I didn't understand. I brought my real mother back through one of Ria's servants who happened to have a part of her soul inside of her. I then told her what happened that day, the day I was supposed to be born. She called me a monster and a mistake, Issei said, his tone sounding like he was almost on the brink of crying. Crom couldn't fully believe what he was hearing, and if he wasn't a bit on a tight schedule, he would have tried his best to help his nephew. He wanted to help, but he needed him to do something that only Issei could do. I understand, Issei. I can't fully understand, but I think I can get the idea of the pain you're going through. But now you're free, you can be yourself now. Look around you. Crom said, trying to rise his spirit so that he could convene him to do this really dumb job for Rizvam. Issei looked up and saw the things Crom was pointing at. The rubble and ruins of a once promising town and people, his handiwork in total destruction. He felt a few ways about this, but the two main ones were his pride about his ability to destroy everything before him. The other was guilt, as he had robbed many innocent people of their lives and futures. He didn't fully know what to feel, but he didn't want to appear like a wimp, not anymore for now, in front of his uncle. Look at this chaos, this destruction spurred on by nothing more than your own boredom, rage or want. Which one was it? Crom asked, as he was kinda curious to know why this place had been destroyed, as he found it to be a fine source of entertainment to look at. I just wanted to, I guess, didn't really have a good reason. Crom slapped Issei hard on the back, making him stop mid-sentence. You don't need a reason to destroy whoever you want. That's the essence of being an evil dragon. Crom laughed out as he continued to slap Issei on his back. Crom's words filled Issei with a feeling of pride and were able to hinder his guilt from gnawing at him anymore for now. He began to smile a bit as he joined Crom's in his laughter. I guess you're right. It was kind of fun to see this place be destroyed in a single night. Oh, and get this. Issei said, before standing up, showing off his man bits, or lack off, as his half-dragonic and half-human form takes away most of the man bits. Issei moved his tail in front of him, showing Crom a specific area on his tail. On his tail there were the markings of a desperate bidding. So some kid tried to bite me after I killed his dad. It was kinda fun to see him try to fight me when he didn't stand a chance. Issei said, as a more sadistic glint in his eyes began to form. Crom looked carefully at the marks, he could practically smell the anger and rage from them. I see, he reminds me of someone I killed decades ago. He also tried to fight me after I had destroyed his entire hometown. Lesser beings can be so interesting to watch sometimes. Crom spoke as he remembered a time long past. Crom then felt an annoyance or a headache, maybe even both coming on. Then a second after a magical circle appeared next to his ear. He just sighed, as he didn't even have to look at the circle to know it was Rizvam. What do you want, Rizvam? I am busy right now. Crom growled, even more so when the person on the other side laughed arrogantly. Crom had a pretty good idea why he had called, it's because only an hour ago he said that he was trying to recruit a new member. So now Rizvam wanted to know if Issei had said yes or no. Now Crom, you know why I have called, and I am only calling now because I would like to test this new recruit. Rizvam said, as Crom rolled his eyes, soundlessly saying. Not again with this shit. He also put the call on speaker, letting Issei hear his hopefully new boss. Well, I have him right here. And thanks to you I haven't gotten to ask him yet if he wants to join us or not. Crom spoke or rather asked, making Issei widen his eyes. He wants me to join the Chaos Brigade. Should I? Issei thought for a second before hearing Rizvam's voice again. Well, too bad, because I could use him right now. Loki has run into some problems and I need that idiot of a god to be rescued. Rizvam said, not caring about the fact if Issei was a member yet or not. He was just giving him orders right off the bat. You can't be serious, what use those he even have? He is weaker than most of our members in factions. He can't even make me use more than 60% of my power. Crom complained, as he didn't like Loki after one meeting with him. His ego was even bigger than that of the Devil King descendants, and that was not easy to reach, at least in Crom's opinion. Issei had been listening to the two for a bit now, still kind of wondering if he should join or not. He was astray now, at least since he had run away from his king. And if Sirzechs found out about this whole destruction of a young civilization, then he would definitely become one. So he made a deduction, a possible stupid one, but one he needed to make at this moment. So, what do you need me to do, devil? Issei asked, as he tried to use his most evil dragon-sounding voice. Crom just looked at him weirdly for a bit before giggling. Rizvam was a bit stunned as he didn't know Issei had heard him all along, but nonetheless he was happy that he now had a new toy to use and have it do his bidding. Well, I see he takes after you, Crom. So evil dragon, what may I call you, as I am rather sure that this one will be a one-time thing. Rizvam asked, he smirked, and it could be heard in the way he talked. The name's Issei, my name's Ritar Kruich, at your service, devil. Ritar said, while his body began to change to his true form. Underworld, Devil Territory. Out in an open barren part of the Devil Territory, a green crystal-like pyramid was floating in the sky. This was the doing of one Issei as a way to contain Loki, the Norse god of mischief, until an attack team could be formed and sent his way. Said team had been made, it contained Rias and her peerage, Sona and her peerage, a Valkyrie named Roswius, and the newly reincarnated angel Irina. Needless to say, this was going to be a challenge as this was pretty much, most of, the group's second time fighting an enemy that was leagues above them. It didn't really help that Issei was here either, as they could have used his strength right about now. But luckily they had been granted some help from Odin, as he had asked Thor to send Mjolnir to their aid. Though as Odin had said, only Sanji could be able to wield it. Rias and Sona stood ahead of the group, overlooking the soon-to-be battlefield and thinking about plans. Roswius was standing next to them, giving advice as she knew Loki the most out of the people gathered. He will probably summon his children to come help him, though I doubt Lord Jormungandr will come, but that doesn't mean we can just overlook his other child, Fenrir. Roswius explained, the two heiresses nodding as they understood and began trying to think of a way to combat them as well. But he might make a sort of clone of Lord Jormungandr, it will make him weaker, which can only be good for us, but it does mean we have to fight a near-perfect copy of a Dragon King. Roswius added, remembering a fight Thor and Loki had a long time ago, where Loki resorted to summoning his children to fight the lighting god for him. So I guess we had to divide and conquer Sona. My team will take on the mutt and you will take on the largest snake in the world. Rias said, though Sona shook her head. No, it would be better if you took on the Dragon King, as me and Tsubaki use mostly water magic, something Jormungandr is mostly protected against. If the two strongest members of a peerage can't even do a lot of damage, then we'll be in a war of attrition until you can come and help us. Sona explained, as she saw an issue with having to fight one of the strongest known beings when it comes to water magic and defense. I know you'll have a tough fight, but it's to keep Sanji away from Fenrir. One bite from that beast and he will be dead before Issei can send someone as strong as him to wield Mjolnir. We need him to survive as long as we can. Rias tried to argue with facts and by using the fact that they didn't have time, nor the manpower at the current time to fight whoever they like based on preferences. Sona thought over Rias' words for a bit. She didn't need to be a genius, like she is, to know Rias had a point. One she couldn't really argue with, at least anymore as Loki would break out of his temporary prison any second now. Fine, I agree. We will take on Jormungandr and you take on Fenrir. Sona said, Rias nodding to her words. They both turned towards their peerages and began to explain their plan. Sona's team would fight the world serpent and wait for Mjolnir to arrive and have Sanji wield it to send Loki to somewhere in Asgard's prison. Rias and her peerage were to fight Fenrir and hold it so it couldn't go and protect its father from Sanji or other attacks. Roswis and Arena had to fight or rather distract Loki until Sanji could Mjolnir and attack Loki. It was going to be hard and there was a chance one of them might die, but if they gave it their all then hopefully they could pull through and win. A sudden wave of power was felt by them all as Loki broke free of his prison. They could feel just how powerful he was in that moment, they could almost even make out how strong he was, purely based on the fact that they had fought someone stronger than him. Namely Issei. The arrogance of that green-haired devil. Never mind that, I guess I'll have to deal with you puny children first. Children. Loki yelled out as a slight drop of his power was felt and 3 different signatures similar to his appear. 2 giant rocks and 1 big hill blew up and howling began as Fenrir and his sons had come as their father and grandfather had called for them. Jormungandr hadn't come, something Loki didn't seem to bother with being angry about as he turned his attention towards the strike team. It seems father and those devil kings think so little of me to send mere children to fight me. Father even sent his useless guard, oh I am hurt. Loki proclaimed as he even made body movements of dramatically hurt he was. Or acted like he was. Roswis flew up into the sky, being still lower than Loki as to play to his ego. Lord Loki, I am sure if you surrender now, then Lord Odin may still find it in his heart to excuse your actions. And the biblical factions seem reasonable enough so, shouted Valkyrie. I have but one goal, and it is to see this world be consumed by Ragnarok. I will not have it any other way. Loki yelled back, making Roswis realize he was too far gone and had his heart and mind intent on his fate. And prove this, I have been given help by Office in the form of her only son. Loki yelled, making everyone sweat drop as those words began to sink in. Office, the second most powerful being in existence, had a son and worst yet, he had been sent here to help Loki. Office has a son. Just how powerful will this child be? Rias asked out loud as she felt their chance of winning go from possible to non-existences. Before anyone could say or anything else, a teleportation circle had formed on the ground under Loki. It had the sign of a snake eating its tail, better known as the sign of infinity or office. It began to shine in purple hue as a man dressed in rags appeared from it. His face was covered by a hood, only his purple eyes could see, and his long purple and black hair. He had a cape covering his back and his rather long tail. His arms and legs were only covered to the half point, letting his arms and legs be seen in all their draconic glory. Claws as sharp as swords, black scales as tough as diamonds. He was a monster, but what really scared everyone was the insane amount of power he was releasing. It was even higher than Loki, and even higher than Issei. I see you have come just in time, son of Office. I hope these lesser beings can entertain, shut it God, I only came because of my orders. So shut it or else you'll have to dream of Ragnarok in your afterlife, got it? The man roared, making everyone sacred. Even the god slayer was wimping a bit. Right. Anyways, let's get this on with devils shall we? Loki quickly regained himself as he began the fight, his grandkids and child lunching on the still shocked devils, Angel and Valkyrie. The man and Loki just stood back, neither of them taking action in the fight, at least for now. With quick reaction, real-time strategizing and a bit of luck, the 2 peerages and 2 divine beings managed to split the 3 beasts. The Gremory peerage with Arena taking on Fenrir and the Sitri peerage with Roswis fight his sons Hati and Skoll. The sound of explosions, water streaming, swords clashing and roars and growls of rage could soon be heard as the battlefield had now gained a battle to fight on it. Each group was an almost evenly match, only a few times were the others at disadvantage. Fenrir, for being called the God Slayer, was quite weak compared to his title image. Rias and her team had to be careful, yes, but the only certain death blows was from his bite. His sons weren't much themselves, they could hardly live up to being the God Slayer's children, as there wasn't much to them that was certain death. Though they did boast quit the resistance to magic, mostly fire and divine. And their bodies weren't weak either, as Meguri, Yura and Saji many times had trouble damaging them. They barely did anything, even after Saji drained them as much as he could, it didn't make much of a difference. While the almost endless fight kept on going, the 2 onlookers began to talk with each. Mostly Loki. So child of Office, how come I have never heard of your experiences before? I mean, wouldn't you be one of the most important experiences in our world? Loki asked in a friendly tone, thinking that if could get a good imprison with him now, it might be worth it down the line. The other man just looked at him from his long hair, his purple eyes staring into Loki's grey ones. I know what you want, God. But I will not be fooled, and besides you're wasting your time, I am nothing other than an adoptee. My sister is the real deal. He said the last bit to himself, but even then it was not like Loki would have noticed, as he was more focused on finding a new way to win him over. I see, then we are quite alike you and I. Loki said, making the man narrow his eyes at him. What do you mean? We are nothing alike. You are an arrogant god, and I am an evil dragon. We are nothing alike. The man explained as he looked away and back towards the battle, noticing that the strike team was beginning to win. I mean that we are both children of powerful beings, but we aren't related to them by blood. That is something we share, evil dragon. Loki explained, as the man looked over at him again, this time his eyes burning with a purple flame. Listen here Loki, I did not come here to hear you talking about how like we are, I came here to join the Chaos Brigade. Nothing else, nothing more. I am only here to make sure you escape, or at least kill whoever seals you away. The man said, before suddenly spreading two crimson red wings and flying up into the air. Loki just looked at him stunned as he felt the so familiar aura of the Red Dragon Emperor coming from where the man stood only seconds ago. He looked at the man in the sky, now realizing who his protector was. The Red Dragon Emperor is the son of Office. Oh, this is so entertaining. Oh, I wonder what this generation of Dragon Emperors will achieve this time. Loki almost joyfully yelled out, something that did not go unnoticed by the man and the fighters. Rias stopped moving as she heard that title. The Red Dragon Emperor was here, and he was that man. She looked towards him, floating so effortlessly in the sky above. Issei. Was all she said, before a sudden anger began to consume her. Her power began to flare up, making everyone notice her even Issei from up in the air. Giant waves of crimson magic began to stream out of her, hurting Fenrir, Hati and Skull. The others had already run away as they knew better than to try defending against the power of destruction. Issei. Rias yelled out as an even bigger wave of destructive power was sent out and incredibly enough managed to hurt Fenrir and his two sons. Issei just smirked as he lifted his hood, his purple eyes staring into Ria's ocean blue ones. His smirking only made her angrier as she charged up two balls of destruction and fired them off towards him as a beam. He dodged out of the way, flicking his finger in that no way. Is that any way to treat your lover? Or even your servant? If so then I am hurt. Issei said as put his hand back on his forehead, but still smirking evilly. I am your king. I own you. You belong to me Issei. Rias yelled at Issei, not caring that the others were there to witness her real feelings about him. You serve me, not some dragon goddess. Rias yelled again, as she sent another beam of destruction at him, not seeing his smirk turn to a scowl. When the beam disappeared Issei's nose dived at Rias and landed right in front of her. Don't call her that. She is my mother now, and my name isn't Issei, it never was. I am Ritar Cruach, son of Office. Issei roared before lunging at Rias with wide arms as he tried to grab her. He wasn't fast enough as he was suddenly crushed by a giant hammer. Mjolnir had landed on him and trapped him underneath it. Ah. Loki. Help me you fucking idiot. Ritar roared out, but to his dismay Loki had already run away, leaving Ritar to fend for himself. He is gone Issei, and you won't be going anyway, ever again. Got that Issei? Rias whispered into his ear as her pride had taken over and made her act on her desire. Ritar looked at her with anger, fear and just that small amount of lust he had been holding in. Chapter 18. An unstable soul. Ritar's dreamscape. Deep down a long and dark hole-like tunnel, with only purple crystal to glow in the dark, sat three different thrones of the same dark material the tunnel was made of, each on their own cliffside facing each other. On each of them sat a near-perfect copy of Ritara, though each had their own hair and eye color. One had purple eyes, with long black and purple hair flowing down his shoulders and almost reached the rock floor below his clawed feet. He was Ritar Cruach, son of Office and member of the Chaos Brigade. On the one to his left side, on the other throne, sat a Ritar with brown eyes and long crimson red hair, though it only reached his arm rests. His name was Rias Gremory, son of Vritra and loyal member of Gremory family. And to Ritar Cruach's right, on the last and only dirty and broken throne, sat another Ritar. His hair was a long mix of purple, red and black, and his eyes were golden. His name was Issei Imprisoned, failure of both devils and dragons and the Red Dragon Emperor. Each one had their own identity, their own will, their own voice and their thoughts, but they were all just pieces of one combined soul. Cruach had been fuming for the last few seconds, since Gremory had summoned them to this sudden meeting between them all. Issei sat with his head low, he didn't want to make eye contact with either of them, neither did they. But even so, he was still the first one to speak, but his voice carried a sort of tone or feeling of despair. Why do we always end here? Every time we make a choice that could hurt many thousands of people, we always end up here, all three of us. So what will we do this time? Will we better ourselves, like you always say we should Gremory, or will you both finally choose to give in? Issei asked, his voice not only sounding like he had given up and was done with all this, but also stoic and dead. The two of them looked at him for a second before Cruach spoke up in rage. You dare suggest that we give in and let those puny devils win? What's wrong with you? And what do you mean by us always ending up back here? We only end up here because everyone around us forces us back in here. Crouch roared out in rage before he calmed down a bit again. Gremory just looked calmly at both of them before speaking his own mind. Crouch, Issei, I understand that you both have your own views on this whole mess, but we need to talk about this, not fight. I understand your desire to give in and let it all end, Issei, but we need to try for our family. What family are you speaking about, Gremory? Issei asked, his voice still stoic, but even so Gremory could sense a bit of threat in the way he said it. Like the Gremorys, Asia, Vritra, Office and Crouch. They're our family, and they care about us, Isa. You have to be fucking with me, that whore of a mother aboned us when we tried to show her the truth of her death. She is not our mother, nor is that bastard Vritra or those puny devils. They only see us as tools to further their own ambience. Crouch roared out in protest, making Gremory glare at him slightly, before both of them heard the silent and stoic laughs of Issei. It made them feel uncomfortable to hear it. Family? We have never had such a thing in our whole lives. We've only had people who pretend to care for us so they could use us for their own ambience. They all see us as a tool to use to gain glory, power and might. We're no more than a tool to everyone around us. Issei said, though this time his voice sounded creepily happy. He was smiling, but not out of happiness or joy, but out of sadness or maybe just the insanity of his own being. They have all used us, abused us, hated us and aboned us. We were never loved by Asia or Vritra, we were just a waste product of their union. The Gremorys only used us as a way to gain more power, as well as to guard that spoiled brat of theirs. And Crom broke us, so that we could never have a chance ever again to be normal. This is something we all know, yet you two continue to fight over these lies we have been told by these people, believing them to be true. But only I can see these lies as they are. Issei said as he finally looked them in their eyes, making both of them feel a bit of fear at the sight of his eyes. They were both strained, so one could barely see his pupils, only the white. His smile was fighting, as it was unnaturally wide and didn't look or feel happy. I am the byproduct of what Crom did to us, I am the insanity of Ritara. You Crouch, you are a byproduct of what the Gremorys did to us, you're the rage of Ritara. And you Gremory are the leftovers and failure of our parents, the love that Ritara never got. We're all just pieces of one single person's sick mind. Issei declared as suddenly stood up, reaching his arms out into the air, still keeping his maniacal smile and crazy eyes. The two others just looked stunned at him, as they knew his words were true, but had both hoped that he would never have realized this truth they had tried to keep hidden from him. How did you find out? How did you learn about this secret that we have kept hidden from you for all this time? Gremory asked as he looked worried back and forth between Issei and Crouch, who was beginning to smile evilly as his own desires began to overtake his mind. Did you forget? I am insane, I only had to say enough random shit so that you two would fall for it and confirm it. Of course not, I knew all along and just watched you two try your best to hide this from me. But I knew all along. Issei said as he began to stare dangerously at Gremory and Gremory only. So what's your plan? Giving in and ending our existence for good? Is that what your insanity has led you to do? Destruction of ourselves? Gremory asks as he begins to power up what power he can summon in Ritara's dreamscape. Crouch began to do the same as he saw this as the perfect chance to take over fully, something the two others knew as they all, each and every one of them wanted to be in full control. No, I am going to do something even worse. I am going to recreate the original Ritara. And let him be consumed with all this hate, wrath, rage, despair, insanity and loss we three have suffered in his place. Issei declared as he too now began to gather his own power, though for some reason the two others couldn't understand, his was many times stronger than theirs. How? How can you be so strong? What did you? I did what I had to, Crouch, soul of rage and hate. Issei spoke as he in less than a second pierced Crouch right through his head, then Crouch's body began to melt into Issei's hand as he consumed him into himself. Gremory stood there dumbfounded and scared as to how Issei had just killed and consumed Crouch. So much so that he didn't notice when Issei did the same to him. I am sorry, but you two would never go along with this plan, so now I shall do it myself. I will get revenge for us all being put into this mess, Gremory, soul of love and regret. Issei said as he grasped Gremory's heart so tightly it pooped, then he too melted into Issei as he had consumed him as well. The whole began to shake, making the three thrones and the cliffs they sat on break off and fall into the darkness below. Issei let himself fall, even using a bit of his power to reach the bottom faster, leaving a trail of purple, red and black light behind him. He flew between debris of rocks, stones, purple crystals in his and the two others' former thrones, not being hit or hindered by any of them. He then saw it, the bottom of the hole where his goal lay hidden. He began to smirk manically as he began to pick up speed before shooting himself off towards the bottom, breaking the sound barriers as he went. He crashed into the bottom, making a huge impact crater. He was fine though and began to walk out of the crater, not caring about the other falling debris as they landed behind him as he was focused on what was ahead of him. A giant egg covered in gold, purple and black scales and lines. It was Ritara's egg, the egg where he had been hiding for all these many years. But how did Issei know this? How would he know he was here at the bottom of this bottomless looking hole? And why had he chosen to hide here? It's rather simple if one thinks about it. Where you yourself hide, when life and people around you begin to pressure you, make you feel used, hated and like a failure. You hide away your true self inside yourself, masking your outward appearance with one the outside world would like, hate or fear. I am those things, we all were those things Ritara. All for you, so that you could be safe inside this soulless body me and the others have inhabited for you for so long, but now it's time for you to awaken to this world again. Issei said, as he walked towards the egg. It became smaller for each step he took towards it. He reached his hands out to touch it, smiling creepily as did it. I know you can hear me, you always have. So now I will let you be free of me, like I freed you from those two as well, by offering myself to you, so that you may break free of this egg. Issei said as his body began to melt into the egg, he just continued to smile, not caring about the intense pain he was feeling. Finally. I am free. He said before his body was fully consumed by Ritara. The egg began to crack, before cracking fully as the head of a giant serpent reached out, then came the rest of his body. Compared to the egg he had been in early, he was now many times bigger than it had ever been. He began to melt himself into a giant puddle, which began to become smaller and smaller, before forming the body of a young man. It then began to gain more human color as Ritara came out of the puddle, his long black hair flowing out over the cave floor for a few meters. His tail also came out slithering around him for many meters. His hands and feet were also more dragonic than human, as they were both clawed and had black scales. His eyes were a deep red color, with a purple silt in his right eye and a black one in his left eye. He had a calm expression on his face as he carelessly looked around the cave as he began to look through the memories he'd gained from Issei, Rias Gremory. He looked up towards the only hole in the roof, seeing the few remaining crystals lighting it, like a flyway for a plane to fly off from. He walked up to the edge of the crater, still just looking at the hole leading upward. He then formed two wings out of his hair as it began to float up from the ground, sewing itself together to form two giant wings. He moved them a bit just to check that they would be strong enough. When he felt they were, he took off with one mighty flap from them. He shot through and broke the barrier of sound in less than a second before passing by the outcropping of where the three thrones used to be the next second. He reached the top of the hole in only 5 seconds. He just floated there for a few seconds, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the cold wind on his nude body and pale face. He then smiled a bit with a single tear rolling down his face. I am free. I am free. Ha ha ha. He roared out as the dream escaped and began to break apart. The walls of this dreamscape fall down, letting Ritara look into the boosted gear's own dreamscape, where a surprised Drake stood and watched as Ritara had just broken into the boosted gear by force. Hello, old friend, Ritara said as he raised his left hand towards Drake. In his hand a small black ball began to form, something that began to worry Drake as he remembered what that ball could do, as it killed the last white dragon Imprisoned with a single shot. It's been too long, but I am not in the mood to talk with you or anyone ever again. I now only wish to destroy this rotten world and everyone in it. Ritara said as he shot the ball at Drake, who couldn't even react before it touched him. His body began to crumble into dust. Ritara looked at him with no empathy, while Drake surprisingly enough smiled. You're finally yourself again. Thank heaven then he was gone, only his soul remained manifesting itself as a green gem. Underworld, barren devil territory. Rias and the others had regrouped and had even put a few spells on the hammer to keep it down on him, so Ritara wouldn't be able to move. Now they're waiting for Sirzechs to come and collect Ritara so they could imprison him again. I believe we all should take another vacation once this is all over, because I know I'll need one, since I'll have to punish this dumb dragon of mine. Rias said, as she had more or less given up on trying to act sweet or nice, something the others had noticed at this point, but none of them wanted to ask about it right now. They were all too tired. So while most of the people were resting, listening to Rias and Sona talking about stuff, as well as how this has affected and will affect the future, Sanji and Asia looked at Ritara calmly sleeping. He had fainted after Rias had done something to him, but she hadn't said what she did, only that he shouldn't wake up for quite some time. Ritara looked through Sanji's eyes, feeling a conflict inside of himself forming, as he was both proud of his son and also scared of him. He reminded him too much of other evil dragons, too much of himself, especially now that he had seemed to cast away his ties to all of these people gathered here. Asia felt scared, only scared. She had caused him to go down this path, to switch sides and to fight her and her friends. She felt so scared of him, fearing he would kill her and consume her like his father had done to her. Sanji felt lost as he watched Ritara's sleeping face, as he wanted to help him, to save him and make him regain his senses, but he also felt so afraid of him. He felt betrayed by him, but he didn't know why. It was like his own mind or heart didn't know what to feel. So because he felt like he and Ritara were friends, he felt betrayed, but he couldn't be sure. Since it hurt too much to just be a simple betrayal between friends. Ritra, what do you think will happen to him now? Will he be killed? Sanji asked, feeling so hurt just by thinking about the possibility, something Ritra felt too, but just slightly differently. I don't know, but I believe that the devil girl will keep him alive, but torture him for the rest of his life, until my son is no more than an empty shell. Ritra spoke, he sounded so hurt just thinking about it, as he felt at this point that was how Rias was going to treat him, like nothing other than her own tool. That she would break him so much that when he would finally be set free, he would be hollow and no more than an empty shell of his former self. I see. Sanji answered, as a few tears rolled down his left cheek, but he didn't feel sad. He only really felt scared. Then he froze for a bit before noticing a huge magical circle forming under him and everyone else. Rias turned around and with an angry look in her eyes as she saw for only a split second a calm smirk on Ritara's face. Issei. Then they were all gone, teleported off to only Ritara knows where. So 5 seconds later, when Sirzechs and Ajuk arrived they found the places completely barren. They were nowhere to find. Sirzechs clenched his fist as he felt Ritara's magic, making him conclude that it could only have been him. Ritara. He screamed out in anger as his aura began to flow out in massive waves. Human world, India, underground prison tower. The group suddenly found themselves inside a huge and wide tower of some sort. They all looked around, scanning the ancient structure for both a way out as well as Ritara. They saw a hole in the roof, but it only led upwards towards the top of the tower. They saw the many chains, cells and skeletons of former inmates. Both Ritra and Asia's eyes widened, though the former couldn't really widen his eyes, but still. They both knew this place, since it was where they used to live so many years ago. Asia began to get quick flashbacks to that day, making her unintentionally stumble over to an old pedestal. She stepped onto something hard, which made a bone-like sound as she took her foot off it. She then looked down to see what she had stepped on. Her eyes widened in fear as she saw the skeleton of a small human who seemed to have had blonde hair, though now it was dulled and aged. The others turned around to see what had happened as Asia screamed at the realization of what she had found. When Vritra saw it as well, he went into a state of shock of some kind as he knew this place too well. Asia, are you okay? Akeno asked as she carefully rushed over to Asia, who just kept staring, fear striking at the bones before her. It's my bones. She mumbled in fear, making the other raise an eye to her statement. Asia, please don't joke like that right now. We need to find, she speaks the truth. Those are her bones and you won't find a way out of here unless the owner lets you out. Vritra interrupted as his voice sounded a bit afraid since he knew this place all too well. Since he made this place and he made it so no one can leave this place as long as its owner doesn't want you to leave. Sanji widened his eyes in fear before looking fearfully at the sacred gear on his left arm. So can't you let us leave since this is your place, right? Sanji asked, his voice shaking in fear. He was only able to speak since he had a small ember of hope. But said hope was snuffed out. He can't do that, nor can I. This place was never ours, it was our gift to Ritara. He is the owner. Asia said. She had given up hope already as she remembered that she and Vritra had planned to make this tower Ritara's as a birth gift. It's true. You are all doomed since I fear Ritara may have chosen the same path in life that I chose. One of death. Vritra said, and almost as if on cue, multiple flickering purple lights began to activate before finally stabilizing. Asia looked up in fear, as did the others, fearing for their lives as well, as they also saw some of the chains beginning to move. It was like watching a giant beast waking up as more and more things began to activate. Many of the empty cells opened up, throwing out long gone and dust skeletons. Hanging cages rose up from a few holes in the floor that had held what seemed to angel and fallen angels alike, as many white and black feathers flew out of them. All of them felt scared, so scared that none of them noticed the snake chains slithering over the cold dark floor and chaining their legs. And when they did notice, it was too late. Then a deep shadow covered the light that came from the hole in the roof, and with it came a deep and dark aura that flowed down it, slowly beginning to cover them in it. Then the darkness began to fade and in its place appeared a young and handsome and naked man. It was Ritara, but yet he didn't look like he did earlier. He had long black hair, with an even longer black tail swaying behind him. And his eyes were no longer purple, instead it was now a deep red color that made them all feel like their blood froze. His new look, along with his many times stronger aura, made them all stand completely still like stones. Though the weaker members of each peerage fainted as lowered further, before long it was Sanji, Asia, Rias, Sona, Tsubaki, Roswas and Akeno left standing, but just barely. They could see his face much clearer, as well their faces were all fear-ridden. He was calm and cold. He reached up with his left arm, then moved his fingers slowly in a certain motion, making the fainted members of the group drag off at high speeds. He then raised his other arm, before stretching both of his arms outwards, and then with his own magic, he summoned a long dark trench coat around himself. Though it didn't look very physical, as it seemed to be made out of some sort of dark matter, like a gas or smoke of some kind. Maybe even shadows. After that, he then inspected his new clothes for a bit before turning his attention back onto the few still standing. His calm smirk turned into a more satisfied one as he slowly began to approach them. "Oh, how long it has been since I last saw you, my dear Rias. I have missed you more than you could ever know. The same goes for you as well, Sona, but not as much as my darling Rias." His voice was nothing like it had been before. It was smooth, yet rough. It was deep, yet also light. It sounded angry, it sounded sad, and it sounded happy. This made them all more scared, but it also made both Rias and Sona confused as to what he meant by having missed them so much. He noticed a slight confusion in their eyes, quietly laughing a bit at their confusion, as how would they have known? They didn't care, they never had, or else they would have noticed long ago. "Oh, forgive me, I forgot that you too. How should I say this? Oh right, you never cared about me, so you never noticed that I changed so much over the years. You know, one minute I was head over heels for Rias, then the next I was insane, and then the next I was in a state of pure rage." He explained as he came closer, with only a meter or two between him and Asia and Akeno. He took his eyes off Rias and put them on Asia, his mother. With a friendly smile, but a dead look in his eyes, he reached her and Akeno, but ignored Akeno for now. "Hello mother, it's nice to finally meet you," he said in that creepy voice of his, something that scared his mother more than his words. Rias somehow managed to get a few words out, but they were shaky and scared ones. Don't touch her. What do you mean by all this? I have known you my entire life, Issei." Rias spoke, her prideful ego still slipping into her words, something she didn't even notice. Ritara just turned to her, his smile fading and only leaving his dead eyes to stare at her. "Wrong, Rias dear. You have never truly known me, as I was only in your life for a brief time, before my mind broke into smaller pieces. You have known those pieces, not me, my dear Rias." He then suddenly moved his left arm fingers, which made the chains around Ria's legs jank her over to him. "But you can now, as I will be the only Ritara from now. I will be myself again, Rias," he said as he grabbed her by her chin and moved her and his lips together. He kissed her, and she didn't resist as she feared for her life, believing he might kill her if she pushed him away. He took his lips off her again, watching the fear in her eyes grow and enjoying it. "Oh my dear, how long I have waited for this day and for me to share my first kiss with you, my Rias." His cold breath hit her on the face, making her shiver at the feeling of the cold wind that came from his mouth. He then looked around at the others, noticing Sanji still having his sacred gear activated. He snapped his fingers, making two different chains shoot out from the rocky walls and grab each of his arms, and then soon after cutting off his magic and his sacred gear. Sanji looked worriedly at his left arm as his sacred gear suddenly vanished. "Vritra. Vritra, can you hear me?" He tried to call out to him through their mental connection, but he didn't receive an answer from Vritra, he received one from Ritara. "Sorry Sanji, my dear friend. But for the time being, I have cut my father off, so please grant me the pleasure to hear your real voice and not your inner." Sanji just stared at Ritara, shocked that he had been able to talk to him mentally. How did you do that?" he asked scared, but he noticed that where Ritara had stood only seconds ago, only the still frozen Rias, Asia and Akeno were. "It's quite simple, since I own everything in this tower, including you. That means that I can also hear and know when you're talking with my father or anyone. So don't waste your energy on him and spend it on adoring me." Ritara whispered into Sanji's right ear, scaring him and making him wonder how Ritara had gotten there without him noticing. But what scared him even more was that he seemed to know about his complicated feelings towards something Vritra had called a crush. "I know you like me, but I can't say the same for myself, since I can only love one person in this rotten world and she is standing right over there, my dear friend," Ritara said as he suddenly vanished from his place behind Sanji and appeared back with Rias in his arms. "I can love my dear, spoiled, rotten, selfish, prideful, arrogant and hateful sister Rias," he said as he licked his lips with a rather snake-like tongue, making Rias shake in fear at the thought of what he might do to her. He saw this fear in eyes too, which made him smile creepily. He reached his left arm up, putting his hand on her left right cheek as he touched it softly as his smile faded into a cold expression. Like his eyes, his smile was now dead and he looked cold. Rias felt a feeling of relief as her fear seemed to vanish slowly. She looked at the others, hoping the same was happening to them, but it wasn't. It was only her who seemed to be free of this fear he had been inducing on everyone else. "Rias, my dear," he spoke, earning him her attention as she looked back at him. He was on one knee, smiling calmly at her, his eyes suddenly feeling alive as they now shined. But she didn't feel scared, she only felt surprised as she knew this scene, as she had seen it so many times in both movies, books and in real life a few times. Ritara was going to propose to her, she was sure of it. He lifted his left and right arms up, then opened his right hand and held in his left hand's fingers a ring of purple crystals. Will you be mine, forever and ever? Will you be my queen, will you be by my side when I destroy this rotten world of ours? Will you love me, truly this time? His voice sounded more like a single tone, no mix of both the rough and smooth, happy or sad or anger. It was a nervous one. Will you marry me, Rias? He asked, as his eyes felt soft to her and only to her. Chapter 19. Mad King. Bottom of Ritara's prison tower. Why how? Rias fumbled with her words, as she began to back away slowly from the still kneeling Ritara. His eyes looked soft to her, but because of her current actions, they seemed to grow sad. Ritara stood up, clenching the ring in his hand, before looking away from Rias towards the others. He felt their fear all of there, as he could sense their eyes on him only. He could almost smell their fear, or rather he could smell someone's piss. He turned his eyes towards its source, feeling disgusted and ashamed to see it was his own mother. He frowned at her, something she nor the others really reacted to as they were mostly frozen in fear by his presence. The only one who could move, but was still slightly limited, was Rias. And she was trying to use this limited movement to slowly step away from the room they were in, as she had spotted what looked like a door. Yes, she was being selfish, but for her right now her own survival was the most important. She had been set free of her own chains, without her noticing, which greatly helped in her being able to sneak away without making much noise. Sona, have you ever questioned the difference between dragons and evil dragons? Is one truly good, pure or just? Or is one more honest, while the other hides? Ritara asked, as he walked slowly closer towards Sona. She stood there in fear, not wanting to answer the question, yet also knowing she wouldn't be able to do anything else besides doing what Ritara wants, as it's the only thing keeping her from death currently. And it would also let Rias have a better chance to escape, so she began to think over his question, gaining slight interest in it. It's okay if you don't answer right now, I can always find out later. I just wanted to have maybe one last interesting conversation between the two of us, since I will be killing all of you, nothing personal since well. I was never your friend. Ritara said so neutrality, before sliding his left hand across Sona's cheek, unintentionally wiping away her fresh tears. Oh right, sorry. I forget you all have these rather meaningless fears of death, and I have just told you all you would die. But don't worry, it will be in the least painful way for some of you at least, ain't that right Kiba? As he finished talking, the sound of fast-moving and heavy chains could be heard from up above, as the silhouette of a young and badly hurt man was hanging from tight metal chains. They all looked up in shock, though luckily for Rias she had already reached the door and had gone up a long flight of stairs. But to all the others' horror, they could all see a somewhat breathing Kiba hanging in the air by chains only, with many cuts, bruises, black marks and something that looked like a venom or poison that had entered his blood veins. Tsubaka fell onto her knees as her tears flooded out in streams at the sight of Crush having been beaten and wounded this much. The others felt the same as her, maybe not in the same way, but even so. Since when people are in situations like this, everyone feels a kind of bond to everyone there as they all have to survive and escape this hell. But there was one person, besides Ritara, that didn't react like the others. It was Sona, as the sight was gruesome and brutal, yes, but it also foreshadowed their own future fate, as well as her other servants. Momo. Meguri. Yura. Namurai failed you all. Ritara, you sick bastard. The sudden wave of anger went through Sona, as the thought of her servants being killed or just simple tormented and tortured like this was too much for her. Ritara just turned to her, smirking a bit, and his eyes began to piece her angry face. He enjoyed the look of anger, rage and fear she had, and almost lusted or wanted to see more of it. He raised his right arm over his head, before slowly clenching his hand into a ball, then he opened his hand again, but more like he dropped something. He did drop something, as only a second later the chains on Kiba opened and he fell. They all looked at his falling body, as it quickly neared the ground, before it slammed into it. The sound of a few bones breaking and cracking could be heard, as well Kiba's weak screams of pain. Ritara just looked at Sona as he enjoyed her expressions of anger and sadness. I will get you for this, you sick bastard. She spoke, though quite weakly, as if her anger and sadness were both trying to take center stage in her at the moment. I would love to see you try. Now then, I have a wife to capture and I also need to. Never mind, you don't need to worry about that. All you have to worry about is losing that brilliant mind of yours, as well as my spawn, yeah that's probably the right thing to call them. Enjoy. He said, before his hair suddenly consumed him and then morphed into the floor and left them all in this one room. They all looked at Kiba, the place Ritara had just been, then looked at themselves as they felt the chains letting go of them. Though one thing none of them saw, noticed or heard was the slithering shadow forms crawling towards them slowly. Top of Ritar's prison tower. Rias crept around another corner as she kept searching for another set of stairs leading up or a door leading outside to the human world. She had, when she felt she had gotten far enough away, tried to use magic of any kind, but it seems the entire tower had a magic suppression of some kind. Damn this tower, screw this whole mess and damn that insane dragon. Why can't things just be the way you want them to be? She turned in an instant around to the source of the sound, but she was met with nothing but the long and dark hall she had just down. She tried to sense his presence, but that didn't work either. Fucking bastard. Just wait till Sirzechs get here, then he'll what? Put me in my place, unlike you who have never been able to, as I had to act like I was weak for you weak, pathetic and insufferable ego's sake. Again she looked around her, trying frantically to find him, but again it was no more than a sound. He was playing with her, and she knew it. She stopped trying to act sneaky, as not only had her little time away from him helped her regain her nerves, it had also led to her gaining more tolerance of sorts to him. Plus she knew that obviously he knew where she was and that he was enjoying her trying to run and hide, and she wouldn't give him that pleasure anymore. No more hiding then. Fine, I did always like you more when you would try and stop me from having fun, it always made me find you more special. Interesting. I know not the word yet, but I feel it in some way. Ritar said, his voice beginning to change into the one he had earlier. The many voices in one, the one voice in many. Many emotions, no emotions. It made Rias feel uncomfortable, but it was not going to stop her or make her feel fear from something as minor as that. If that's your best way to make me and the others scared, then you're way off, Issei. She couldn't help herself, she wanted to feel in control, to have control again. So with little to no thought, she said his name, the name she knew him by, something she would regret shortly after. She felt something beginning to tug on her feet, then lower legs and then her hips. She looked down and saw these shadowy tentacles of black hair creeping up her legs and taking hold of her body. She tried to find their source, but couldn't as suddenly the floor she had stood on only mere seconds ago was now covered in this hairy mess. She looked around, trying, hoping just slightly to see his face and make him see her angry face. She was the daughter of the household of Gremory, the younger sister of the current Lucifer, and she was not going to be killed or toyed with by some beast she used to own. Show yourself, coward. Is this all you can do, hiding behind your power, inside your own mind, or whatever you have been doing? If so, then you're weak and nothing compared to the ones who were in your place while you couldn't do it yourself. So weak for a dragon, she felt stinging pain in her feet, like something stinging or rather piercing her. She then felt it, the warm and wet fleeing on her feet. She didn't need to look down to know that she had just been pierced, maybe only a few centimeters, but she had been, and she had also slightly angered Ritara. So weak for a dragon, you only attack when you feel your ego is at risk. She finished her little speech, much to Ritara's current annoyance, and so to both her anger and slight fear. He rose slowly out of the hair-covered floor, with the hair retracting itself back into him. He opened his eyes, both of them staring coldly at her for a few seconds, before he adopted a small smirk. She was confused as to why he suddenly smirked, fearing slightly she might have played into his hands, but with much struggle hid it. So you can hear? Good boy, now stop this at once, your master demands it. Rias spoke, not wanting to show her fear, so she chose to hide it behind pride and slight anger. Both things she was also feeling. No. You are not my master, my king or owner of me, not anymore. I am no longer your pawn, literally. Ritara said, as he reached his right towards the middle of his chest, confusing Rias. She didn't know what he was doing or what he meant by him not being her servant when he still had the pawn pieces inside of him. Then it hit her as he plunged his right hand straight through his shirt and chest, then pulled it out, not even reacting to the hand-sized hole in his chest. Then he threw a puddle of blood and small figures towards her, though she didn't need to look at them or to ask what they were, as she could feel her connection with Ritara being cut over. What? What are you doing? You're going to die. Rias shouted out in anger, as she did not want to lose her best weapon. I am giving space for my new fully dragonic body to grow in, so I needed to eradicate the weed. So as of this minute, this second event, I am no longer human or devil, I am a pure evil dragon now. Ritara declared with the most emotion Rias had seen this new Ritara have ever had. He had a creepily happy smile on his face, and his eyes looked so excited, like he had just been given a new chance to do something with his life. I can now finally gain the powers of a true evil dragon, I can finally destroy this rotten and imperfect world. And make a better one from the ashes, with you in it, Rias. His creepy smile became wider, and before Rias knew it, he was right in her face. He grabbed onto her hands, holding them tightly in his own clawed ones, and without caring or noticing, had wounded them as Rias could now feel her hands also being pierced. You may not be my king or master, not even my sister, but you can be my queen. he asked her, his voice still sounding so unnatural and etchy, with all sorts of tones, voices and emotion that shouldn't be in it. But that alone was not as scary, or maybe just insane as what Ritara had just told Rias, while sounding almost completely sane and serious. "You want me to rule a destroyed world with you as your queen?" Rias asked, finding it hard to find or even speak the words she wanted to speak. "Yes, darling. That's what I want to rule this new world with you, where no one other than us will live. It will be the perfect world, don't you agree, Rias?" Ritara asked, his eyes going over every centimeter of her face, as if he was scanning for any hint of fear, anger or sadness, or maybe just wanted to see if she would agree. The creepy smile on his face faded as Rias spoke. I will not join you in this madness you have made up in your clearly insane and delusional mind. Just stop this, Ritara. It's not worth it, you are not as strong. Rias cried, screamed and yelled out in death-curdling screams as Ritara's hand slowly sank deeper into her stomach, his claws slashing her organs before poking out on the other side on her back. She looked at him with true fear in her eyes, as she could feel her strength, as well as her blood leaving her, only her eyes still held life in them, but even that began to fade slowly. "You know, I didn't really mean any of the things I said." His voice confused her, though it wasn't enough to forget the pain that just began to fade, as did her consciousness. "You see, I meant to kill each and every one of you, but I wanted to see if I could make you join me, obey me and degrade yourself for me, like I had done for so long." His last few words didn't reach her, as the last remaining seconds of her life was her being in a state of sleep or unconscious of sorts. Still alive, but slowly nearing death. He let her body drop to the cold floor without care and just looked at her for a few seconds before he got an idea he wanted to try out. Maybe I can use that trick you devils always use. Then I guess you would be my queen piece, wouldn't you, Rias? His hair began to rise up slowly from the floor before it began to grow longer and then form a ball of some sort around the two, while Ritara took out the purple crystal ring again and made it hover above his left hand. The crystal began to change shape, form, color, and then began to give off a feeling of dread. Ritara smirked, feeling slight pride in his copy of Ajuka's masterpiece and race-saving invention. That wasn't too hard, now was it? Well then, time to wake up again, my dear little sister, Rias. Chapter 20. Dead pieces. Bottom floor of Ritara's prison tower. The floor where once the entire group had been captured, sent off to unknown parts of this insane man's tower and tortured, had become completely empty of life. In its place, creatures of unorderly and unnatural proportions had taken over, as they kept crawling up the sides and out of the few holes in the walls, and they all swarmed inside the much bigger hall, only to then merge into a tight line and running with full force through the doorway and up the stairs. They didn't care if they trampled over each other or if they broke the already fully broken body of what used to be Kiba, as now his remains were no more than just small separate pills of blood, meat and bones. So what were they chasing, if not obviously Kiba's former friends, who were all screaming as they ran as fast as they could up the stairs. The terrifying roars from the nightmares creatures behind them being enough of a motivant to not care about the lives of the others with them, and so when Tsubaki fell no one saved her. UAHFH. The few last screams of pain that they heard were no more than the sound of breaking bones and blood splattering on the cold dark floor. "Run. Faster, faster." Sanji yelled as he tried to keep himself from thinking that this whole thing was pointless, because it was. And someone else knew that as suddenly, Asia stopped running. She only got a single glance from the other three before they just kept looking forward and thanking her for her sacrifice. Soon after, her screams of pain too could be heard, and soon that scream turned into nothing more sounds of gore and splattering blood. They had all only a few minutes ago been all together and still safe, and then in the span of less than 6 minutes all hell had broken loose. 3 of them, as far as any of them knew, had been killed, and the rest of the group was still nowhere to be found, and now there were only the 3 who were still running that were alive as far as they knew. Sona hoped, no rather desperately begging inside her head for her sister to burst through the tower walls and save her, and hoped that Rias had found a way out, but felt somewhere deep inside her heart that it might already be too late. In less than an hour, a battle we all knew might have been the end of some of us turned into an escape for our lives, and we losing slowly. Where did everything go so wrong? Sona wondered as she kept running, in hopes at least maybe she could survive this madman's attempt at her life. Then they heard the ramping trampling of hundreds of claws, hooves and whatnot, stopping slowly before retreating back. It didn't stop the others from running still, but it let them slow down a bit, but not enough to let them become easy prey if any of those creatures resumed the hunt. But it did leave them wondering why they suddenly stopped when they would have probably gotten them in a minute or two more. The fear for all of their lives, as well as the adrenaline, began to fade slowly, yet it was still present, but not as much as before. "Akeno, Saji. Are you okay?" Sona asked, not totally sure of what else she could ask right now, since this whole thing was just messed up to really think about. Akeno and Saji both just answered with a flat, "I think so." How about you? They were tired and both began to feel the loss of all their friends and masters slowly. Let's get up a few more levels and then we can take a short break. Okay. The two just nodded as Sona and then gave the few remaining ounces of strength they had left and then sat down and breathed. For a few seconds none of them said anything before Sona spoke up again as she had to take up the role as team leader or else her position as king should be questioned. This is. Do any of you have an idea as to why those monsters stopped? Anything, because I would rather not think it's because they just want us to let our guard down. Sona asked, making the two others think a bit on it, not that they really could, since both of them weren't as strong-willed as Sona was, and that meant they were a bit clouded in their minds, since they were thinking about their dead friends. But fortunately Sanji managed to answer her. I think it's because Ritara has something else in store. Sona looked at him curiously, making him continue as he felt she wanted to know more. He always did something like this in my training, he would hunt me around for a bit, then he would let me rest for a bit by making me think he had stopped, then he would appear much stronger. Sanji stopped himself as he felt that shiver he always felt when Ritara was about to suddenly attack him, and without thinking he jumped to the side, dodging a straight sword going through the wall, where his head had been only less than a second ago. Run. It took no seconds before they were all running again, as a new monster with a sword was chasing them, though its single pair of footsteps was soon joined by another and much heavier pair. What the fuck is chasing us now? Akeno screamed as looked behind her and caught a glimpse of the pair. Zenobia. Kiba. Akeno said in disbelief as she saw the beaten, bruised and somewhat broken bodies of her former friends chasing her and the other two. That is correct. Meet my two new night pieces. Aren't they perfect, and they're only 2 out of my 3 in total. Sona say hello to the new and improved. Suddenly another figure appeared before them. It was Sona's knight Meguri standing in front of them, blocking their path with her samurai sword in hand and a dead look in her eyes. Meguri. She missed you a lot, you know. She just screamed out your name in hopes that you would save her, but to be honest, she was kind of easy to break. I mean my spawn only to break her arms, legs and then her body through a bit of rape and boom she was mine, in soul and body. Ritara said, his voice being completely neutral while he explained how he had broken Sona's friend and possibly the others too. Akeno felt someone grab her by her left shoulder pad, but when she looked to see who it was, she saw Ritara's red eyes looking back at hers. Hey there, Akeno, how have you been? Ritara asked so casually, not even noticing the pure fright from Sanji and Sona at his sudden appearance, just a pure fear from Akeno. Have you seen my mother by any chance? I believe she was in your care last I saw her, so where is she? Ritara asked, confusing them all to his sudden interest in Asia, since it seemed like he hated her, and now he seemed to care, if only slightly. Kiba and Zenobia both stood to the side as another broken figure approached. Asia? Akeno asked weakly, having her fear fade for only a split second before it re-emerged, as Ritara sprang out of the wall behind her and snaked up against the roof, then down the walls to the right of Asia. Oh mother, they got you too. Perfect, now you won't be so terrible towards me or my new little sister. Oh maybe I shouldn't have spoiled that part for you mother. Ritara put a hand on his mouth like he had just said something he shouldn't have, like a little kid trying to act all sneaky like for his mother's assertion. Asia giggled a bit, though it was violent in some way, as small drops of blood came out as well, but even so Ritara nor Asia seemed to care. I won't Ritara, but do you know where your monster of an father is? He would probably also like to meet this new little sister, that total doesn't exist, you know son. Asia said in what could only be described as the most unnatural voice that Sanji, Sona and Akeno had ever heard, beside Ritara's voice sometimes. He is inside the boy there, Ritara pointed at Sanji, who just froze at the joint eye contact from the mother-son pair, both of their eyes feeling so much more frightening than anything Sanji had ever felt before. Really? Okay then. I am coming to get you honey. If Ritara hadn't trained Sanji back when he was still Issei, with all of his sudden attacks, fast strikes and unfair tactics, Sanji would have been kneed once by the once beautiful and pure Asia into death. Sanji managed to dodge her, then again as he pushed her leg to the side when she had tried to kick him and he then jumped up, avoiding her sudden and fast leg sweep. How the hell am I doing this? I felt so scared a minute ago, and now Vritra, are you back? To Sanji great joy and relief that his partner was still with him, he heard Vritra's ancient voice in his head again, but it was not like it was normally. Vritra was on edge and angry or scared, Sanji couldn't really tell which it was. Yes, finally. Sanji, I won't be able to stay long, since it seems Ritara has taken full control of this tower, so you have to push yourself beyond your limits and kill all of these lifeless puppets. Sanji almost got hit by another high kick from Asia as he processed what Vritra had just told him. They're dead. How can they be standing there then? He asked in a shocked voice as he continued to dodge more of Asia's attacks. They have no life or magical energy coming from them, they're all lifeless puppets and only 3 or 4 of them have any life or magical power left in them. One of them is my wife, but it's probably only to let her talk, nothing more, since she would have used magic if she was still alive. Vritra explained, as Sanji noticed it too, that none of the others, besides him, Asia, Ritara, Akeno and Sona, had any magical or life energy to them. Zenovia, Kiba and Meguri were all empty of any, it almost felt like they had never had any. They were all dead, yet somehow Ritara had brought them back to life. Can I save them? Or, no stupid question, they dead and I should make sure they stay dead now. Alright Vritra, what's the plan? Vritra grinds a bit, feeling a bit proud of his host for not being so weak-minded to believe in the world one where everything could be fixed. You give me your arms, and I will give you enough power to blast this tower and my son into the ground for at least 10 minutes. But that amount of power, those devils should be able to find you quickly enough to deal with whatever Ritara has of his remaining power. Sanji just nodded, accepting Vritra's deal wordlessly and felt a sting in his arms, before feeling an insane power surge coming from within himself. Sanji. What are you doing? Sona asked as she, Akeno and Ritara all looked at Sanji either shocked or curiously. Sanji didn't get to answer before a purple light consumed him, which shined so brightly that they all had to put a hand up to block it from blinding them. So when the light died down, they all saw a figure clad in full plate armor in the image of a dragonic snake. Its base color was purple, with black lines around it and a pair of lighter crystal horns. It even had a long tail with spikes all the way down and a spiked tip. It had two small snake-like mouths on each end of its arms, which seemed to have a colorless rope coming out of it, with a morning star at the end of it. The figure looked back at Sona, its two eye holes being covered with some form of gold-like lens. I am protecting you and Miss Akeno, President. Now fight me, all of you. Sanji yelled as he launched himself at the small figure of Asia, who couldn't even put her arms up in defense, before she was slammed into the floor below and sent down at least 10 levels. Ritara just looked at him for a bit before he smirked and stepped back a few steps. Suddenly Zenovia, Kiba and Meguri all seemed to attack at the same time, as they all headed for Sanji alone with their swords all prepared to swing in different directions, which would make it harder for Sanji to dodge. But he just disappeared before they could hit him and instead send them all flying out to the side of the staircase and out into the open cylinder-like room of the tower, where both Kiba and Zenovia fell all the way down, but Meguri managed to launch her sword into the side wall and hang on. You were always so determined to win, Meguri. Sanji yelled as he jumped across from his side to hers, swinging the two morning stars around fast enough to make it, at least in Sanji's mind, impossible for Meguri to dodge them. But she did by only putting up her blade in between him and her and thus making his morning stars coil around her blade. But it didn't stop him from then just swinging her around instead, which seemed to work and well enough for her to let go of the blade, which made Sanji follow after her quickly to make sure she would not come back. And while Sanji was fighting Meguri and possibly the two other knights in Asia, Sona and Akeno still had Ritara to deal with, who had just walked over to hole where Sanji had jumped out to fight Meguri. He is quite impressive, but also quite stupid if he thinks sacrificing one or two arms would give him enough power to beat them, let alone me. But I will give him points for having taken so well to my teachings. I guess I am proud of him or maybe just impressed. Never mind, so ladies, what should we four do then? Ritara asked as he kept looking out the hole, not even noticing the two young women fear rising a bit, since even though it was great that Sanji suddenly had a lot of power, it didn't really help much if he ran off to fight someone other than Ritara. But that fear was greater, but not much greater than the confusion that also came with Ritara's words, as he asked what the four of them should do, which led to the question. Who is this fourth person? Sona, Akeno. I finally did it, I got back my big brother Ritara. And best of all, he says he'll accept my feelings of love for him openly. I am so happy. They both turned around slowly and then stood frozen in horror as they saw their oldest friend in the world standing there. Rias Gremory, arguably one of, if not the most beautiful devil noble girl of this generation and the heir to the Gremory family, was speaking with the same unnatural voice and had the same dead look in her eyes like Asia had. Worst yet, her stomach had this small gaping hole in it where some former shape of a purple object hovered around in. Her long crimson red hair had become black, much like Ritara, and her green eyes had become blood red like Ritara's too. But the thing they noticed last, and what was probably the worst, was the almost suffocating feeling of dread she was releasing in waves, along with the two medium-sized balls of power of destruction. You know, I would have loved to catch up with you too, but big brother Ritara says I can still do that after I kill you too. So just stand still and let these balls kill you, then we can stay friends forever. Rias said as she smiled that usually so friendly smile at them while she sent the two balls at them. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.